The Sterling estate was a masterpiece of glass, steel, and silence. Perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, it was the kind of house that appeared in architectural magazines, perfect, cold, and transparent. But for Evelyn Sterling, the transparency was a lie. For months, she had felt a persistent itch under her skin, a feeling that the walls were exhaling secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Evelyn was the wife of Arthur Sterling, a man whose wealth was built on high-frequency trading and a ruthless reputation. Their marriage was a curated gallery of expensive dinners and silent car rides. Lately, things had been disappearing. A diamond earring here, a confidential bank statement there. And then there were the whispers, the way the staff looked at her when she entered a room, and the way Arthur had become increasingly obsessed with security. The tension reached a breaking point on a Tuesday afternoon. Maria, their soft-spoken maid who had been with them for 3 years, was out running errands. Evelyn, driven by a sudden, inexplicable impulse, entered Maria's small quarters in the West Wing. She told herself she was looking for her missing earring, but deep down, she was looking for a reason to distrust the world around her. The room was sparse and impeccably clean. A small bed, a wooden desk, and a crucifix on the wall. Evelyn began to look through the drawers, feeling a pang of guilt. As she leaned down to check under the vanity, a tiny, metallic glint caught the afternoon sun that it was hidden inside a decorative air vent near the floor. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She reached in with trembling fingers and pulled out a device no larger than a button. It was a high-end, wide-angle pinhole camera. "What are you doing, Maria?" Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking, but as she examined the device, she noticed something chilling. The camera wasn't pointed at Maria's bed. It was positioned to capture the doorway, monitoring everyone who entered or left the maid's room. More importantly, the brand on the back was Vanguard Security, the same firm Arthur used for the office. Evelyn retreated to her own study, her mind racing. She was tech-savvy enough to know that these cameras broadcasted to a local server. She opened her laptop and accessed the home's internal network, using the administrative bypass Arthur had once shown her during a safety drill. Her breath hitched as she found a hidden directory labeled storage_m. She clicked the most recent file. The video flickered to life. It showed Maria's room, but the date stamp was from last night. In the video, the door opened. A figure walked in. It wasn't Maria. It was Julian, Arthur's younger brother and the black sheep of the family. He looked frantic, searching Maria's mattress until he pulled out a thick envelope, but then, the video showed something even more terrifying. Julian looked directly at the camera, not with fear, but with a smirk. He blew a kiss to the lens and whispered a name. "Found it, Arthur." Evelyn slammed the laptop shut. Her husband wasn't just spying on the help, he was using the maid's room as a drop-off point for something illicit involving his brother. The security she thought protected her was actually a web of surveillance designed to keep her in the dark. Just then, the heavy oak door of the study creaked open. Arthur stood there, his tailored suit jacket draped over his arm, his eyes unreadable. "You look pale, Evelyn," he said, stepping into the room. "Have you seen Maria?" "She's late with my tea." Evelyn hid her trembling hands under the desk. "I haven't seen her, Arthur. Maybe she's tired of being watched." The air in the room turned ice cold. Arthur's smile didn't reach his eyes. "In this house, everyone is watched. It's for their own good." Evelyn realized then that the camera in Maria's room was only the beginning. The house wasn't a home, it was a chessboard, and she had just discovered she was the only player who didn't know the rules. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced politeness. Evelyn sat across from Arthur at the dining table, the clinking of silver against porcelain sounding like a ticking clock. She watched him, the way he methodically cut his steak, the way he sipped his vintage red wine. Was this the man she had loved for 10 years, or was he a stranger who treated his own home like a high-stakes surveillance op? "You're quiet tonight," Arthur remarked, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Is it the charity gala? If the planning is stressing you out, hire more help." "I don't need more help, Arthur. I need honesty," Evelyn said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Arthur paused, his fork hovering in midair. Honesty is a luxury, Evelyn. Efficiency is what keeps this roof over our heads. He stood up, kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt more like a brand than an affection, and retreated to his private library. Evelyn waited until she heard the distinct click of his door locking. She didn't go to her bedroom. Instead, she slipped into the kitchen. Maria had returned and was silently washing the dinner dishes. The maid's shoulders were hunched, her movements mechanical. Maria, Evelyn whispered. The maid jumped, nearly dropping a crystal glass. Oh. Mrs. Sterling. You frightened me. In my study. Now, Evelyn commanded, her voice low but firm. Minutes later, Maria stood in the center of Evelyn's study, twisting her apron in her hands. Evelyn didn't waste time. She pulled the tiny camera from her pocket and set it on the mahogany desk. Maria's face went deathly pale. She didn't look surprised, she looked defeated. I found it in your room, Maria. In the vent, Evelyn said. Were you spying on us? Was it Julian? Or was it my husband? Maria sank into a chair, her composure breaking. I didn't put it there, madam. I found it months ago. But I didn't remove it. Why not? Because, Maria wiped a tear from her cheek, if I moved it, he would know I knew. And if he knew I knew, I would end up like the girl before me. Evelyn felt a chill. The girl before Maria had supposedly moved back to her home country overnight due to a family emergency. At least, that was the story Arthur told. He put it there to watch me, Maria continued, her voice trembling. But he's a fool. He thinks he's the only one who knows how to use technology. I have my own security, Mrs. Sterling. Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, battered USB drive. I didn't put a camera in my room. I put a receiver in the wall. Every time that tiny camera transmits data to Mr. Sterling's server, my device intercepts a copy. I wanted insurance. In case I disappeared. Evelyn's heart raced. What's on it? Everything, Maria said. Not just my room. Your husband has been routing the feeds from the entire house through a bridge in my quarters. He thought it was the perfect, blind spot, because no one ever goes into the maid's room. He isn't just watching the staff. He's watching you. Evelyn took the USB drive and plugged it into her laptop. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hit the play button. The screen split into 4 grids. One showed the library. Arthur was currently on the phone, looking agitated. Another showed the hallway. But the third one caused Evelyn to gasp. It was their master bedroom. The camera was hidden behind the vanity mirror. The footage began to skip back in time as Maria navigated the files. Look at last Friday, Maria whispered. The video showed Arthur in their bedroom. He wasn't alone. Julian was there, along with a woman Evelyn didn't recognize, a woman wearing a business suit that looked suspiciously like a government uniform. They were opening the floor safe behind the wardrobe. Arthur was handing over stacks of documents, but he wasn't selling trade secrets. He was signing over deeds to properties Evelyn didn't even know they owned. He's draining the estate, Evelyn realized, her voice a ghost of a sound. He's moving the assets out of my name. Suddenly, the audio on the recording kicked in. Julian's voice filled the room. And what about Evelyn? When she finds out the accounts are empty? Arthur's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. Evelyn won't find out. By the time the bank sends the notice, she'll be declared mentally unstable. The incidents have already started. The missing jewelry, the hallucinations of being watched, the doctors I've hired will do the rest. Evelyn stared at the screen in horror. The oddities she had been experiencing weren't accidents. Arthur was gaslighting her on a massive scale to steal her inheritance and discard her. There is more, Maria said, her eyes fixed on the door. Look at the footage from 2 hours ago. In the garden. Evelyn clicked the file. The infrared camera in the garden showed Arthur talking to the head of their security team. He was handing the man a small vial. "In her tea tonight," Arthur said on the recording. "Just enough to make her sleep deeply. We move the rest of the files tonight." Evelyn looked at the cooling cup of herbal tea sitting on her desk, the tea Arthur had, kindly, asked the kitchen to prepare for her. A heavy knock sounded at the study door. "Evelyn." Arthur's voice boomed from the other side. "I noticed you haven't touched your tea. Is everything all right in there?" Evelyn and Maria locked eyes. The hunter was at the door, and the prey had just found the map to the trap. The knock at the door grew louder, more insistent. "Evelyn. Open the door." Arthur's voice was no longer a suggestion, it was a command. Evelyn's eyes darted to the cup of tea. She had to act fast. She grabbed the cup and poured the liquid into the soil of a large potted palm in the corner of her study. She smeared a little bit of the honey-sweetened residue on the rim and placed the empty cup back on the desk. "Hide," she whispered to Maria, pointing toward the heavy velvet curtains that masked the French doors. Maria disappeared just as Evelyn unlocked the door and stumbled back toward her chair, rubbing her eyes as if in a daze. Arthur walked in, his eyes immediately landing on the empty cup. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face, a look so predatory it made Evelyn's stomach churn. "There's my girl," he said softly, walking behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. His grip felt like iron. "You've been so stressed lately. I just want you to rest. You're starting to look tired. Fragile." "I do feel a bit lightheaded," Evelyn slurred, playing the part. "The tea, it was very strong." "Good. Why don't you lie down? I have some business to attend to with Julian in the library." As Arthur began to lead her toward the master suite, the chime of the front doorbell echoed through the vaulted foyer. Arthur stiffened. Who the hell is that at this hour? He checked his watch, his brow furrowed. He didn't like surprises. He motioned for Evelyn to stay put and went to the balcony overlooking the entrance. Evelyn followed at a distance, staying in the shadows. Standing at the front door was Clara Sterling, Arthur's younger sister. She was a high-powered defense attorney with a sharp tongue and an even sharper mind. She didn't wait to be invited, she pushed past the butler and walked into the center of the hall, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble. "Arthur! Don't bother hiding," Clara shouted, looking up. "I know what you and Julian are doing. And I want my cut." Arthur's face turned a deep shade of purple. He rushed down the stairs to meet her. "Clara, you're drunk. Get out of here." "I'm perfectly sober," she snapped. "I saw the wire transfers. You're moving the Sterling Trust funds into an offshore shell company. If you think you're leaving me out of the Evelyn inheritance payout, you've got another thing coming." Evelyn, watching from the shadows of the upper landing, felt a cold wave of betrayal wash over her. It wasn't just Arthur. His entire family was circling her like vultures, waiting for her mental breakdown to be finalized so they could tear her life apart. "Keep your voice down," Arthur hissed, grabbing Clara's arm. "She's upstairs. She just took the sedative." "Oh, please," Clara scoffed, shaking him off. Evelyn was always too soft to notice anyway. "But Maria? That maid you're so fond of? I saw her leaving a message for someone on her burner phone. You're not the only one with eyes in this house, brother." Evelyn retreated to her study, her heart hammering. She needed to get Maria out, but Maria was gone. The curtains were fluttering in the breeze, the French doors were open. Maria had fled into the night. Evelyn grabbed her laptop and the USB drive, but as she turned to leave, she saw a new notification on the screen. The hidden camera in Maria's room, the one she thought she had compromised, was still recording, but it wasn't showing Maria's room anymore. Someone had hacked the hack. The screen now showed a live feed of Evelyn's own study. She saw herself, standing at the desk, looking at the laptop. And in the corner of the frame, she saw the door behind her slowly opening. It wasn't Arthur. It wasn't Clara. It was Julian, Arthur's brother. He wasn't holding a vial of sedative or a legal document. He was holding a heavy, silenced pistol. "You really should have just stayed in bed, Evelyn," Julian said from the doorway. He wasn't smirking anymore. He looked bored. "The suicide note we wrote for you is quite poetic. It would be a shame to waste it by making this a struggle." Evelyn realized the camera in the maid's room was a decoy, a lure to get her to start digging so they could frame her instability on a paranoid obsession with the staff. "Julian, wait," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the terror. "Arthur is planning to double-cross you too. I saw the documents. He's putting everything in Clara's name, not yours." Julian paused, the gun lowering just an inch. "Nice try. But Arthur needs me." "Does he?" Evelyn pointed to the laptop. "Check the storage_M folder. The one with the green icon. It's a recording of him and Clara from 10 minutes ago. He's already planning your accident once I'm out of the picture. 2 deaths in the family in one night. It's a tragedy, but for Arthur, it's just a clean slate." Julian's eyes flickered to the screen. It was a lie, Evelyn hadn't seen such a recording, but she knew the seeds of greed were easy to water. In this house of vipers, trust was the only thing they didn't have. As Julian stepped toward the laptop, Evelyn reached for the heavy glass decanter on the side table. Julian's greed was his greatest weakness. As he leaned over the laptop to see the supposed evidence of Arthur's betrayal, his finger loosened on the trigger. In that split second, Evelyn didn't think, she acted. She swung the heavy crystal decanter with every ounce of terror-fueled strength she had. The glass shattered against the side of Julian's head. He grunted, stumbling back as the gun skittered across the hardwood floor. Evelyn didn't wait. She lunged for the weapon, her fingers closing around the cold steel just as Julian lunged for her. "You bitch," he roared, blood trickling down his temple. "Stay back." Evelyn screamed, pointing the gun at him with trembling hands. "I'll do it, Julian. I have nothing left to lose." Before Julian could move, a section of the oak paneling near the bookshelf, part of the original architecture of the house, swung inward with a soft hydraulic hiss. A hand reached out, grabbed Julian by the collar, and jerked him backward into the darkness of the wall. A muffled thud followed, then silence. Evelyn stood frozen, the gun still raised. From the secret passage emerged Liam, the estate's soft-spoken gardener who had worked for the Sterlings for 5 years. He was wearing a tactical headset and holding a professional-grade taser. "Lower the weapon, Mrs. Sterling," Liam said calmly. "I've been waiting for a long time for someone to break the cycle in this house." "Liam? What is this?" Evelyn gasped, looking at the hidden door. "The Sterlings didn't build this house, Evelyn. They bought it from an old tech mogul who was obsessed with privacy and secrets," Liam explained, glancing at the unconscious Julian on the floor of the passage. "I don't work for your husband. I work for a private firm hired by your father's estate before he passed away. He knew Arthur was a parasite. He hired me to be the ghost in the machine." Evelyn felt a dizzying mix of relief and fury. "My father? He knew. He suspected. My job was to collect enough evidence for a criminal conviction, not just a divorce," Liam said. He stepped over to the laptop. "The camera you found in Maria's room? I'm the one who leaked the frequency so you would find it. I needed you to wake up, Evelyn. I couldn't help you if you were still playing the role of the dutiful, oblivious wife. Maria, is she with you?" "Maria is safe. She's been my eyes on the ground. But we've run out of time," Liam said, his expression hardening. "Arthur and Clara are coming up." They heard the glass break. The sound of heavy footsteps pounded on the stairs. Arthur's voice boomed through the door. "Julian? Evelyn? What's going on in there?" Liam grabbed Evelyn's arm. "We have to go into the crawlspace. There are monitors in there that control the entire house's infrastructure. If we can get to the server room, we can broadcast everything, the safe cracking, the poisoning attempt, the offshore transfers, directly to the police and the press simultaneously. But Julian is in there, Evelyn pointed to the passage. He's zip-tied. He's not going anywhere, Liam said, pulling her into the narrow, dimly lit corridor behind the walls. The passage was cramped, smelling of dust and electronics. Rows of monitors lined the walls, showing every room in the house, even the ones Arthur didn't know were bugged. Evelyn saw Arthur and Clara burst into her study. They looked at the shattered glass, the empty teacup, and the open secret door. On the screen, Arthur's face transformed from concern to pure, unadulterated rage. He looked directly into one of the hidden cameras, one Liam had installed. "I know you're in there, Evelyn," Arthur shouted, his voice distorted by the small speakers in the crawlspace. "You think you've won? You're in my house. My walls. I'll burn this place to the ground with you inside it before I let you take a single cent." Clara looked panicked. "Arthur, stop. We need to leave. If the police are on my payroll." Arthur screamed, turning on his sister. "Now get the gasoline from the garage. If she wants to be a ghost, I'll make her one." Evelyn watched in horror as her husband, the man she had shared a bed with for a decade, began to pile books and curtains in the center of the room. He was losing his mind. The cold, calculating businessman was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "He's going to do it," Evelyn whispered. "He's going to burn us alive." "Not if we flip the script," Liam said, his fingers flying across a tablet. "The house has a high-end fire suppression system. But it also has an automated lockdown mode for theft prevention. I'm going to trap them in the study and vent the fire suppressant gas. It'll knock them out in seconds." "Do it," Evelyn said, her voice cold. Liam hit a sequence of keys. Across the monitors, Evelyn saw heavy steel shutters slam down over the study's windows and doors. Arthur lunged for the door, but it was too late. Thick, white mist began to pour from the ceiling vents. Arthur and Clara coughed, clawing at their throats as the oxygen was displaced. Within moments, they slumped to the floor, unconscious. "It's over," Liam said, exhaling. "No," Evelyn said, looking at the screen. She saw a small red light blinking on the server rack. "Look. There's another feed. One you didn't install." Liam frowned, leaning in. "That's coming from the basement. I didn't know there was a sublevel." The hidden feed showed a small, concrete room. In the center sat a man Evelyn hadn't seen in years. It was Arthur's father, the late Silas Sterling, who was supposed to have died in a boating accident 5 years ago. He was surrounded by monitors, watching his children collapse in the room above with a chilling, proud smile. The camera in the basement turned toward the crawlspace, as if Silas knew exactly where they were. He picked up a microphone. "Well done, Evelyn," the old man's voice crackled through the speakers. "You finally showed some spine. I always told Arthur he picked a wife who was too weak. I'm glad you proved me wrong. Now, shall we discuss the real family business?" The air in the crawlspace felt thinner. Evelyn stared at the monitor, her heart stopping at the sight of Silas Sterling. The man who had been given a state funeral, whose ashes were supposedly scattered at sea, was sitting in a high-tech bunker beneath her own feet. "Liam, tell me I'm hallucinating," Evelyn whispered. Liam's face was a mask of shock. The thermal sensors never picked up a life form in the sub-basement. He must have a shielded room. This changes everything. My firm was hired by your father, but Silas was your father's greatest rival. If Silas is alive, then your father's death might not have been an accident either." The voice of Silas Sterling crackled again through the hidden speakers, smooth and predatory. "Don't bother looking for the entrance, Mr. Miller. My security protocols are far more advanced than the ones I gave my incompetent sons. Evelyn, dear, come to the library. There is a floor safe beneath the Persian rug. Enter the code October 24th, 19. I think it's time we had a face-to-face." "Don't go," Liam warned. It's a trap. He's already trapped us in his house, Liam, Evelyn said, her voice hardening with a newfound clarity. If he wanted us dead, he could have let Arthur burn the place down. He wants something. Leaving Julian unconscious in the passage, Evelyn and Liam navigated back into the main house. The white mist in the study had settled, leaving Arthur and Clara sprawled on the floor like discarded dolls. Evelyn didn't even glance at them. She walked to the library, kicked aside the heavy rug, and punched the numbers into the keypad. The floor didn't just open, a section of the library floor descended like a sleek, industrial elevator. As they lowered into the earth, the temperature dropped. The elevator opened into a vast, cold room filled with humming servers and walls of monitors. This was the nerve center of the Sterling Empire. Silas Sterling sat in a leather chair, looking remarkably healthy for a dead man. "You look disappointed, Evelyn," Silas said, gesturing to a chair. "Were you hoping for a ghost?" "I was hoping for a world where your family wasn't a collection of monsters," Evelyn replied, standing her ground. Silas laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Monsters build the world, Evelyn. My sons are merely scavengers. They were so busy fighting over the scraps of my estate, that they didn't realize I was using them as a screen. While Arthur was playing at being a millionaire, I was consolidating real power. Data. Influence. The things that actually move the world." He pointed to the screens. They weren't just showing the house. They showed stock market fluctuations, private messages between politicians, and live feeds from some of the most secure buildings in the country. The camera in Maria's room, Evelyn realized. That wasn't Arthur's idea, was it? "Arthur is a child who likes to play spy," Silas said dismissively. "I suggested the idea to him through an anonymous security consultant. I knew he'd use the maid's room as a hub. I needed a reason for you to start digging, Evelyn. You were the only one with the moral outrage necessary to trigger the endgame." "And what is the endgame?" Silas leaned forward. "To liquidate the Sterling name. Arthur, Julian, and Clara have become liabilities. They are loud, messy, and greedy. Tonight, the police will arrive. They will find Arthur and Julian guilty of attempted murder, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Clara will be disbarred for her involvement. The Sterling name will be dragged through the mud. And you?" "I remain dead," Silas smirked. "But the assets? The billions hidden in the accounts Arthur thought he was stealing? Those are being moved into a new foundation. A foundation in your name, Evelyn." Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement air. "You want me to be your front? You're framing your own children to start a new empire with me as the face of it? You are clean, Evelyn. Everyone loves a victim who survives. You'll be the tragic widow of a disgraced millionaire, a woman who rose from the ashes to lead a global charity. And I will be the one directing your hand from this room." Liam stepped forward, his hand on his taser. "She's not going to help you, Silas." Silas didn't even look at him. He pressed a button on his desk. On one of the monitors, a live video appeared. It was an elderly man in a hospital bed, Evelyn's father. He was breathing through a ventilator. "He's alive." Evelyn gasped, her knees buckling. "You told me he died in the hospital after the stroke." "He's been in a private facility of mine for 3 years, Silas said calmly. "His death was as fake as mine. He's quite comfortable. But his comfort depends entirely on your cooperation, Evelyn. Be the face of my new world, and your father continues to breathe. Refuse, and, well, accidents happen in hospitals every day." Evelyn looked at the screen, then at the man who had orchestrated her entire life like a chess match. The camera in the maid's room hadn't just revealed her husband's secrets, it had opened the door to a nightmare much larger than she could have ever imagined. "You're not a man," Evelyn whispered. "You're a parasite." "I'm a Sterling," Silas corrected. "Now, make your choice. The police are 5 minutes away. When they walk through that door, are you the victim who was saved by a miracle, or are you the woman who loses everything? The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, a low hum that vibrated through the reinforced concrete walls of Silas's bunker. The clock is ticking, Evelyn, Silas said, his eyes fixed on the array of monitors. The police will be at the gate in 4 minutes. In 3 minutes, the house's automated security will fail, allowing them entry. You need to be upstairs, looking traumatized. Liam, you will be the heroic bodyguard who saved her. Evelyn looked at Liam. He gave her a subtle, imperceptible nod. They had no choice, not yet. I'll do it, Evelyn said, her voice sounding hollow even to her own ears. But if a hair on my father's head is harmed, I will burn every server in this room, and I don't care if I go down with them. Silas smiled, a terrifyingly genuine expression of pride. That's the Sterling spirit. Now, go. The elevator is waiting. As they ascended back to the library, Liam leaned in close to Evelyn's ear. I managed to plant a tracker on his local network while he was talking, he whispered. I can't find your father's location yet, but I can trace the video feed signal. I need time. How much time? A few hours. Once the police are here and the chaos begins, I'll slip away. The elevator doors opened. The house was eerie. The white gas had cleared, but Arthur and Clara were still unconscious on the floor of the study. Evelyn took a deep breath, messed up her hair, and ripped the sleeve of her silk blouse. She needed to look like a woman who had just escaped a murder attempt. The front doors burst open. Police. Hands in the air. Flashlights cut through the dim hallways. Evelyn stumbled out of the library, falling to her knees in the foyer just as the officers reached her. Help me, she cried, the tears coming easily now out of pure, raw exhaustion. My husband, his brother, they tried to. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of blue lights, silver handcuffs, and aggressive questioning. Arthur and Julian were revived only to be marched out of the house in shackles. Arthur's face was a mask of confusion and betrayal. He looked at Evelyn as he was pushed into the back of a squad car, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. He didn't understand how his perfect plan had turned into a televised arrest. By dawn, the Sterling estate was a crime scene. Detectives were hauling out boxes of documents, the very documents Silas had made sure were easy to find. Evelyn sat on the back of an ambulance, a gray blanket draped over her shoulders. A female detective, Detective Vance, approached her with a notepad. Mrs. Sterling, we've recovered the footage from the maid's room. It's quite disturbing. It confirms your story about the poisoning and the attempted shooting. But there's one thing that doesn't make sense. Evelyn's heart skipped. What is that, detective? The footage shows you entering a secret passage in the wall, Vance said, narrowing her eyes. We searched that passage. It leads to a server room that appears to have been wiped clean in the last hour. There's no sign of anyone else. Evelyn realized Silas was already moving. He had cleaned the sub-basement the moment she had gone upstairs. I was running for my life, Evelyn said. Maintaining her composure. I didn't see where it led. I just wanted to get away from Julian. Before Vance could ask more, a sleek black car pulled up to the police tape. A woman stepped out, Maria. She wasn't wearing her maid's uniform anymore. She was dressed in a sharp, expensive suit. She walked straight to the police line and showed an ID. I am Maria Santoro, she told the officers. I have been working undercover as a domestic employee in this house for 18 months. I have the secondary encrypted drives the suspects were trying to destroy. Evelyn watched in shock as Maria was ushered toward the lead investigator. Maria glanced at Evelyn, not with the fear of a servant, but with the cold, professional gaze of a partner. Liam appeared beside Evelyn, handing her a bottle of water. She's not with me, Evelyn, he whispered, his voice urgent. Maria isn't a government agent. I just checked her ID signature on my tablet. That's a private security clearance for Sterling Global. Evelyn felt the world tilt. Maria wasn't her ally. Maria was Silas's handler on the outside. Silas hadn't just used Evelyn, he had surrounded her with his own loyalists from the very beginning. The camera in the maid's room hadn't been a mistake, it was a test to see if Evelyn was worthy of joining the inner circle. "Liam," Evelyn whispered, "we need to leave. Now." "I have the signal," Liam replied, showing her his screen. "The video feed for your father isn't coming from a hospital. It's coming from a warehouse in the harbor. Sector 4. "Then let's go," Evelyn said, standing up and dropping the blanket. "Before Maria realizes we know." But as they turned to head toward Liam's truck, the undercover Maria blocked their path. She had 2 uniformed officers with her, officers who didn't look like they were following standard police protocol. "Mrs. Sterling," Maria said with a thin, sharp smile. "The doctor says your father's condition is fluctuating. It would be best if you came with us to see him immediately. For his safety." The maid was no longer hiding. The trap had closed, and the real war for the Sterling fortune was just beginning. The drive to the harbor was conducted in a suffocating silence. Evelyn sat in the back of a black SUV, flanked by 2 of Maria's officers. Liam had been forced into a separate vehicle, and the look he gave her through the tinted glass was one of desperate warning. As they neared the industrial docks, the shimmering glass of the Sterling estate was replaced by rusted shipping containers and the smell of salt and diesel. They pulled up to a windowless warehouse marked Sterling Logistics. "Where is he, Maria?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heart. "He's inside, Evelyn." "But remember," Maria said, checking a tablet, "Silas is watching through every lens in this building. If you try to play the hero, the oxygen to your father's room gets cut. It's that simple." They entered the warehouse. It was a labyrinth of crates, but at the center stood a modular medical suite, a high-tech bubble of glass and white light. Through the window, Evelyn saw her father. He looked frail, a ghost of the man who had taught her how to ride a horse, but he was alive. Maria led her into a small observation room. On a wall of screens, Silas's face appeared. "You made it. Good. Now, let's discuss the first order of business for the new Sterling Foundation. You will sign these documents, transferring the recovered assets from Arthur's hidden accounts into our new structure." Evelyn looked at the documents. They were legal death warrants, not for her, but for her soul. Signing them would make her the legal architect of Silas's global shadow network. "I need to see him first," Evelyn said. "I need to know it's really him and not a projection." Silas sighed. "Always so suspicious." "Fine. 2 minutes." Maria opened the airlock to the medical suite. Evelyn stepped inside. The hum of the ventilator was the only sound. She reached out and touched her father's hand. It was warm. He opened his eyes, squinting at her through a fog of medication. "Eve, Lynn," he wheezed. "I'm here, Dad," she whispered. She leaned down as if to kiss his forehead, but she whispered into his ear. "Don't be afraid. I'm ending this tonight." While the officers were distracted by a notification on their tablets, Evelyn did something they didn't expect. She didn't look for a weapon. She looked for the camera. She knew Silas was watching from his bunker. She also knew that Silas's ego was his blind spot. He thought he had total control over the feed. But Evelyn remembered what Liam had told her. The house and all its subsidiaries used the same Vanguard security bridge. She reached into her pocket. She still had the tiny pinhole camera she had found in Maria's room, the one she had snatched from the desk before the police arrived. It was a transceiver. If she could plug it into the medical suite's diagnostic port, it would create a feedback loop that Liam could use to hijack the signal. She fumbled with the port behind her father's heart monitor. Click. Outside, in the second SUV, Liam saw his tablet light up. "That's my girl," he muttered, his fingers flying across the keys. He didn't just hijack the feed, he opened a direct line to every major news outlet that was currently live streaming the Sterling family scandal. Back in the observation room, Maria's tablet began to beep frantically. Silas. There's a breach in the uplink. What? Silas's voice boomed over the speakers. Evelyn, what are you doing? Evelyn stepped back from her father, looking directly into the camera in the corner of the room. She wasn't playing the victim anymore. She was the one in control. Silas, you said everyone loves a victim who survives, Evelyn said, her voice echoing through the warehouse and, unbeknownst to him, through millions of television sets across the country. But do you know what they love more? A villain who gets caught in his own web. On the screens behind Maria, the live news feed suddenly switched. Instead of the reporter standing in front of the estate, it showed the warehouse. It showed the medical suite. It showed the dead Silas Sterling in his bunker, looking confused. My name is Evelyn Sterling, she said, speaking to the world. And for the last 10 years, I have lived in a house built on lies. My husband tried to kill me. My brother-in-law tried to frame me. And the man you see on the screen, Silas Sterling, who supposedly died 5 years ago, has been holding my father hostage to build a criminal empire. Shut it down. Silas screamed from the bunker. Maria, kill the feed. I can't. Maria shouted, staring in horror as her own face appeared on the national news as an accomplice to kidnapping. The warehouse doors suddenly groaned. The real police, not Silas's hired thugs, had tracked the signal Liam was broadcasting. Evelyn, you've ruined everything. Silas roared. If I go down, everyone goes down. I've set the warehouse to self-destruct. You have 60 seconds. The red emergency lights began to pulse. The officers panicked, dropping their weapons and running for the exits. Maria looked at the documents, then at the fire alarm, and fled into the shadows. Evelyn didn't run. She looked at her father. We have to move, Dad. She began unhooking the locks on the mobile hospital bed. It was heavy, and the siren was deafening. Just as she reached the door, a figure blocked her path. That it was Arthur. He had escaped custody during the chaos at the estate, his clothes torn, his eyes bloodshot with a manic intensity. He had a gun. You did this, Arthur hissed. You destroyed the family. You destroyed me. The family was a corpse, Arthur, Evelyn said, pushing the bed forward. I just stopped the smell. The warehouse groan was deafening, a chorus of twisting metal and shattering glass. Smoke began to curl from the server racks near the ceiling as the self-destruct sequence initiated by Silas triggered electrical fires across the floor. Arthur stood in the doorway, the gun shaking in his hand. He looked pathetic, a fallen prince of a kingdom that never truly existed. Move, Arthur, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low frequency. The police are outside, and this building is going to be a crater in less than a minute. Do you want to die for a father who just tried to incinerate you? Arthur's eyes darted to the screens, which were still broadcasting the chaos. He saw Silas's face, not a face of fatherly concern, but one of cold, calculated disgust. You were always the weak link, Arthur, Silas's voice echoed through the dying intercom. A puppet who couldn't even keep his own wife in check. Stay there and burn with the rest of the evidence. The betrayal hit Arthur harder than any physical blow. His arms slumped, the gun pointing toward the floor. In that moment of hesitation, Evelyn shoved the heavy medical bed forward with all her might. The wheels slammed into Arthur's knees, sending him sprawling across the concrete. Liam! I need help! Evelyn screamed. Liam appeared from the haze of smoke, his tactical gear covered in soot. He had a radio in one hand and a fire axe in the other. The exit is blocked by a fallen container. We have to go through the loading bay on the north side. Liam grabbed one end of the medical bed, and together they sprinted through the labyrinth of crates. Behind them, Arthur scrambled to his feet, but instead of following them, he turned back toward the observation room. He wasn't trying to escape, he was trying to reach the terminal to kill his father's connection. It was a suicide mission fueled by spite. Leave him. Liam shouted over a massive explosion that rocked the south wing. "We can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." They reached the north loading bay just as the overhead doors began to slide shut as part of the lockdown. Liam jammed the fire axe into the track, creating a narrow gap. "Push, Evelyn. Push." With a final, agonizing heave, they slid the medical bed through the gap and tumbled out onto the wet asphalt of the pier. Seconds later, a concussive blast threw them to the ground. The warehouse erupted in a fireball of orange and black, sending a shockwave across the harbor that shattered the windows of nearby patrol cars. Evelyn lay on the ground, gasping for air, her face pressed against the cold pavement. She looked up to see her father, still strapped to the bed, coughing but conscious. He was safe, but the war wasn't over. "Evelyn," Liam panted, crawling toward his tablet which had survived the blast in his pocket. "Look. The signal from the bunker. It's moving." Evelyn looked at the screen. The GPS coordinate for Silas Sterling wasn't stationary anymore. He wasn't under the house. "He's in a submersible," Liam realized, his eyes widening. "There's a private tunnel from the sub-basement of the estate directly to the ocean floor. He's heading for international waters." Evelyn stood up, wiping blood and soot from her brow. She looked at the burning warehouse, then at the dark, vast ocean. Silas was the head of the snake. If he escaped, he would simply start again, spinning a new web from some remote island, and her father would never truly be safe. "Can we stop him?" she asked. "I can't hack a submarine from a pier, Evelyn," Liam said. "But I can override the harbor's automated docking gates. If I can close the seawall before he passes the perimeter, I can trap him in the bay." "Do it." "There's a catch," Liam said, looking at her with a grim expression. "To override the seawall, I need a biometric override from a Sterling board member. Your husband is inside that fire. Your brother-in-law is in a police van. You're the only one left with the digital signature." Liam handed her the tablet. A prompt flashed on the screen, "Authorization required, board member 004, Evelyn Sterling." Evelyn hesitated. To sign this was to officially claim her place in the company she hated. It was to admit she was a Sterling. "If I do this, I'm tied to them forever," she whispered. "No," Liam said softly. "If you do this, you're the one who shuts the door on them." Evelyn pressed her thumb to the scanner. "Access granted." 3 miles out in the dark water, a massive steel gate began to rise from the seabed, cutting off the escape route. On the tablet, they watched a small red dot, Silas, stop abruptly as he hit the barrier. Suddenly, a new window popped up on the tablet. A private video called that it was Silas. He was in a cramped, high-tech cockpit, the red emergency lights of the submersible reflecting off his glasses. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked terrified. "Evelyn. Listen to me," he hissed, his voice cracking. "The seawall is malfunctioning. If you don't open it, the pressure will crush the hull. You'll be a murderer." Evelyn picked up the tablet and held it at eye level. She looked at the man who had spied on her, drugged her, and kidnapped her father. "I'm not a murderer, Silas," Evelyn said calmly. "I'm just the woman who found the camera in the maid's room. And right now, the whole world is watching you drown." She didn't wait for him to respond. She swiped the screen, ending the call, and handed the tablet back to Liam. The sun rose over the harbor, but it didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like a spotlight on a crime scene that spanned the entire city. The Sterling submersible had been intercepted by the Coast Guard after it was trapped by the seawall. Silas Sterling, the man who had cheated death once, was dragged out of the water in handcuffs, shivering and shouting about investments that no longer existed. Evelyn sat in a private room at the city hospital. Her father, Thomas, was sleeping in the bed next to her. The doctor said he would recover, though the years of isolation and sedation had taken their toll. A knock at the door startled her. It was Detective Vance. She looked exhausted, her blazer wrinkled and stained with coffee. "He's in custody," Evelyn, Vance said, sitting on the edge of a plastic chair. Silas, Julian, and Clara. Arthur, they found what was left of him in the warehouse ruins. I'm sorry. Evelyn felt a strange numbness. She didn't mourn Arthur, but she mourned the woman she was when she had first met him, the woman who believed in a house that was actually a cage. We recovered a safe from the wreckage of the observation room, Vance continued, pulling a small, charred plastic bag from her pocket. It was fireproof. Inside was this. It has your name on it. It was a small, high-capacity memory card. The technicians haven't looked at it yet, Vance whispered, sliding it across the table. I'm breaking protocol here because I think you've seen enough cameras for one lifetime. Take a look. If it's evidence, I need it back in an hour. If it's personal. I never saw it. When Vance left, Evelyn plugged the card into her laptop. She expected more of Silas's ledgers or perhaps a final taunt from Maria. Instead, the screen flickered to a grainy, low-light video. The date stamp was from 5 years ago, the night her father supposedly had his stroke. The video wasn't from a hidden security camera. It was filmed on a shaky handheld device. The camera was hidden behind a bookshelf in her father's old study. On the screen, her father, Thomas, was sitting at his desk. He looked healthy, vibrant. Across from him sat Silas. You can't do this, Thomas, Silas said on the tape. If you go to the board with the truth about the offshore laundering, the Sterling name dies. Your daughter loses her inheritance. She'll be a beggar. I'd rather she be a beggar than a thief, Thomas replied, his voice firm. I'm turning the evidence over to the SEC tomorrow morning. I've already contacted a young man named Liam to handle the data transfer. Evelyn gasped. Liam hadn't been hired by her father's estate, he had been hired by her father personally 5 years ago. The video showed Silas standing up, his face contorting with rage. But he didn't attack Thomas. He stepped back and checked his watch. Thomas. You always did love that herbal blend Evelyn brings you. Evelyn watched in horror as her father reached for his cup, took a sip, and within seconds began to clutch his chest. It wasn't a stroke. It was a chemical inducement, but then, the camera moved. The person holding the device stepped out from the shadows. It was Maria. She was much younger in the video. She looked terrified, but she was filming the entire thing. She watched Silas call his private medical team, not an ambulance, to take Thomas away. The video cut to a new scene, filmed only a week ago. Maria was in her maid's quarters at the Sterling estate. She was looking into the lens, tears streaming down her face. Evelyn, Maria's voice was a whisper. If you are watching this, it means I am either dead or I have fled. I wasn't just Silas's spy. I was his prisoner. He caught me filming him that night 5 years ago. He told me if I ever stopped working for him, he would kill your father. I stayed in that house, cleaning your floors and watching you be poisoned, just to keep Thomas alive. Maria held up a key. There is a vault in the Grand Caymans. Account number 77 Alpha. It contains the original files your father tried to save. It also contains enough money to ensure Silas never sees the sun again. I hid the camera in my room so you would find it. I knew I couldn't tell you the truth. Silas was listening to every word, so I had to make you hate me. I had to make you fight. The video ended. Evelyn sat in the silence of the hospital room, the blue light of the laptop reflecting in her eyes. The maid she had despised, the woman she thought was a villain, had been her silent guardian for 5 years, sacrificing her own life to keep a dying man breathing. Evelyn looked at her father. He stirred in his sleep, his hand twitching. It's over, Dad, she whispered. The cameras are off. She deleted the file from the laptop but kept the memory card. She wouldn't give it to Detective Vance. Not yet. She had one more thing to do. 2 months later, the Sterling estate no longer looked like a fortress. The heavy iron gates were gone, replaced by an open driveway and a sign that read, the Maria Santoro Foundation. Evelyn stood in the foyer, watching a team of contractors remove the last of the hidden wires from the walls. The house was being gutted. Every smart device, every hidden microphone, and every mirrored surface that could hide a lens was being hauled away in industrial bins. The legal battle had been swift. With the 77 alpha files, Evelyn hadn't just buried Silas, she had dismantled the entire Sterling corporate structure. Silas was facing life in a maximum security medical wing, and Clara and Julian were trading secrets for shorter sentences in separate prisons, but Evelyn wasn't there for the victory lap. She was there to say goodbye. "We found something in the West Wing," Liam said, walking toward her. He looked different now, clean-shaven, wearing a simple flannel shirt. He had stayed by her side through the entire trial, no longer a ghost in the walls, but a man who finally lived in the light. "Is it another camera?" Evelyn asked with a weary smile. "No. It's in the maid's room. The demolition crew refused to touch it until you saw it." Evelyn followed him to Maria's old quarters. The room was empty now, the bed and desk gone. But the wall where the air vent had been, the one where Evelyn found the first camera, had been stripped of its wallpaper. Behind the paper, someone had written on the plaster in charcoal. It was a map. Not of the house, but of a small village in southern Italy. Below the map was a single name and a phone number, Lucia Santoro. "Maria's sister," Evelyn whispered. "I tracked the number," Liam said. "Maria hasn't been seen since the warehouse fire. The police think she vanished into the wind, but I think she went home. She left this for you, Evelyn. Not as a maid, but as a friend." Evelyn touched the charcoal lines on the wall. She realized that while she had been the victim of the Sterling's greed, Maria had been the hero of their downfall. Maria had turned her own prison into a weapon to save a family that wasn't even her own. "I want to find her, Liam," Evelyn said. "I want to tell her she doesn't have to hide anymore." "The Foundation can handle that," Liam replied. "We have the resources now. We're already helping 42 other families who were under Vanguard Security's protection. You've turned this place from a house of vipers into a house of healing." Evelyn walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel the itch under her skin. She didn't feel the need to look over her shoulder. The cameras were gone, and the silence was finally her own. As she turned to leave the room, she saw a small, discarded object in the corner. It was a child's toy, a small wooden horse that had been tucked behind the baseboard. She picked it up and realized it was one of the things that had disappeared years ago. She walked out of the house and down to the pier where her father was waiting in his wheelchair, watching the waves. He looked up at her, his eyes clear and full of life. "Ready to go, Eve?" he asked. "Ready, Dad." She didn't look back at the mansion as they drove away. She didn't need to. The millionaire's wife was gone. In her place was a woman who knew that the most important things in life are the ones that can't be captured on film: trust, freedom, and the quiet dignity of a secret kept out of love. The ending. The story of the Sterling estate ended not with a bang, but with a breeze through an open window. The cameras were dark, the secrets were told, and for the first time in history, the people inside the house were finally, truly, alone. Epilogue. 1 year later, in a small, sun-drenched cafe in a village overlooking the Mediterranean, two women sat across from each other. One was a former millionaire, the other had once been her maid. No one was watching them. No one was recording their conversation. "You found me," Maria said, smiling over her espresso. "I had a good map," Evelyn replied. "They didn't talk about the cameras. They didn't talk about the Sterlings. They talked about the future, a world where every room was a sanctuary, and the only things hidden were the things meant to be kept in the heart."